So good morning, everybody, for those who have joined us. We're now at the final phase of our work on blockchain applications in health. This working group was promoted by the Health Data Interest Group, which had its meeting yesterday. The assumption for the working group was that it would be meaningful to examine the ways in which blockchain technologies can make it possible to access the data that traditionally are separately stored by a multiplicity of health repositories. The expectation was to be able to check through this work package whether blockchain systems, on one hand, overcome the difficulties currently encountered by patients in ensuring an effective portability and overall control of their health data, while on the other hand, leaving those data in decentralized electronic folders, but allowing to share or to mobilize those data with a precise verification and tracing of who would really access them. The privacy and sensitivity of data would thus be effectively protected while enhancing medical research and the personalized treatment of patients by making possible to really use big data in healthcare and to fully benefit from the knowledge or discovery capacity of artificial intelligence. After a series of working group sessions delayed by the COVID pandemic, this report that we are going to illustrate today aims at highlighting the state-of-the-art of blockchain applications in the healthcare domain and to assess the main regulatory and legal issues raised by the usage of this technology. And finally, this report summarizes a set of guidelines for blockchain design and implementation in different use cases based on lessons learned from concrete experiences in the healthcare domain. We can start from some blockchain's basics. The blockchain is a technology that allows people and organizations to reach agreement on and permanently record information without a central authority. It is thus an important tool for building a fair, inclusive, secure, and decentralized digital economy, being at its core a shared peer-to-peer database. There are different kinds of blockchains, but normally they all include a means for nodes on the network to communicate directly with each other. All blockchains provide a mechanism for nodes to propose the addition of information to the database, which is the common ledger, usually in the form of some transaction and a consensus mechanism by which the network can validate what is the agreed upon version of the database. Blockchain is a disruptive innovation regarding uncertainties that traditionally have implied the need of relying on some amount of trust for coping with them. It is a technology providing transparent and secure storage and transfer of data without having recourse to a central authority. With blockchain, all data transfers become traceable and auditable by participants to the ledger. Blockchain allows to envisage a distributed rather than a hierarchical foundation of trust. It allows a sort of trustless certainty. If internet has dramatically reduced transaction costs of information, the blockchain can do the same regarding the exchange of data incorporating value. The blockchain allows to digitize value transfer and use self-enforcing smart contracts for automating the enactment of contractual rules, where code is low. Finally, the blockchain allows to have recourse to issuing digital tokens for crowdsourcing, which is called tokenomics. There is a potential of blockchains, but in order to understand it, we need to go back to some economic concepts and understand the economic role of transaction costs. The concept of transaction costs was first introduced by an economist, an English economist, Ronald Coase, in a disruptive paper on the nature of the firm in 1937, and later in a further paper, The Problem of Social Costs in 1960. For both of these papers, he became Nobel laureate for economics only in 1991, however, more than 50 years after his initial groundbreaking contribution. The conceptual innovation brought forward by Ronald Coase came as a result of asking an apparently simple question. Why do clusters of individuals operate under the direction of hierarchies and not purely under the guidance of market prices? He famously answered that using the price system is costly in terms of transaction costs. According to what has been defined the Coase theorem, in the absence of transaction costs, the allocation of resources is independent of the distribution of property rights. It is now possible to reverse Ronald Coase' economic analysis by highlighting how new technologies deeply affect transaction costs, especially with regard to trust. In fact, what Internet did to transaction costs regarding information, blockchain can do regarding trust. Reliable data-rich information systems become possible without being paralyzed by excessive transaction costs. The limitation of decentralized solutions was in the past the all-pervasive and exclusively reductive role played in market-based solutions by just one synthetic information, the price. The advantage of hierarchical solutions was based on the capacity to tackle uncertainty by centrally ordering a multiplicity of information about which actions to follow. The blockchain methodology, by allowing solutions based on decentralized protocols, removes the friction and cost of current intermediaries and makes it possible to develop distributed and transparent systems where empowerment can be shared, asymmetries can be balanced, and qualitative aspects can be taken into account. You can ask, what is the potential of blockchains as social technologies? Well, blockchains are technical solutions that facilitate the smooth functioning of an ecosystem by managing and implementing decision-making through automatic consensus, creating incentives that nudge participants into behaving constructively, generating trust and transparency. By enacting information system with inherent data integrity, blockchains constitute strong anti-corruption tools and feature as relational software, enabling new trust mechanisms capable of transforming social relations and of reducing transaction costs. There are close similarities between blockchains and bureaucracies, though bureaucracies are centralized and blockchains are distributed. Both are defined by the rules and execute predetermined rules. Both work as information processing machines. Both work as trust machines. Bureaucracies are thus natural candidates to have centralization being replaced by federated blockchain system. Sustainable growth implies doing more with existing resources and attracting more resources to expand the scale of operations. Blockchain reduce costs and increase the flow of funds, helping social innovation organizations to scale up by enabling marketplaces and issuance of alternative currencies and tokens. So how can blockchains translate into innovative social policies? Key administrative systems are typically the social protection ones. They constitute a peculiarity and a fundamental element of pride for EU countries, though differing between Bismarckian and Bavarian models, including also Mediterranean varieties and experiments combining both approaches. Traditionally, the welfare states are characterized as mainly exerting a piggy bank or a Robin Hood role, the first helping people to ensure against social risk and redistribute resources over the life cycle, the second entailing measures to reduce social exclusion by redistributing income and wealth. This value mix is translated into a combination of four key functions: regulatory, redistributive, insurance, production. Historically, these functions have been largely centralized, but could be reorganized in different manners, for instance, as personal welfare accounts or regulated social markets, where beneficiaries could have incentives to check that the universal but not unlimited coverage is responsibly guaranteed by the public by public agencies and private organizations, and play a role in changing the market through informed decision and collective actions. So, on this basis, can blockchains translate into opportunities for healthcare? Yes. Blockchain reside at the several disciplines which are key for providing healthcare solutions. Game theory, tokenomics, network theory. There is a huge potential for employing cryptographic and algorithmic methods to record and synchronize health data transactions across distributed networks in an immutable manner, using smart contracts as coded instructions which execute on the occurrence of an event and extend the functionality of blockchains from storing transactions to performing computations, developing multi-sided platforms where data providers, being both clinical institutions, individuals, researchers, and industry, can on data integrity and security and mutually reinforced network effects, allowing to manage data flows and usage based on individual free choice and self-determination, making dynamic data portability in real time possible for individuals and companies, along with various compensation models, applying health big data to artificial intelligence and machine learning for medical knowledge discovery, improving clinical trial records, minimizing fraud related to prescription drugs, and tracking and preventing the sale of counterfeit drugs and devices. Not surprising, several use cases and pilots have been launched with applying blockchains. There has even been a blockchain pilot by the Federal Drug Administration in collaboration with KPMG, Merck, and Walmart, where they see something in the drug supply chain security and the fact that they can much faster intervene on anything wrong appearing there. Among the European Commission initiatives, the European Blockchain Observatory can be cited, aiming to accelerate blockchain innovation and the development of the blockchain ecosystem within the European Union, and so help cement Europe's position as a global leader in this transformative new technology. The European Blockchain Observatory has issued many reports. One of the last ones is on the convergence of blockchain, artificial intelligence, and IoT, stating that blockchains can be used to develop open, decentralized data markets in which data producers, whether individuals or enterprises, can sell, rent, or share their data. In the same way, blockchains can be used as the basis for open, decentralized markets for artificial intelligence models, allowing independent artificial intelligence developers to directly sell their wares more easily and large projects even share computer resources. In our report, we show an infographic image taken from a recent publication of year 2019, showing the relationship existing between raw data, blockchain technology, healthcare applications, and how stakeholders can benefit of all this. And we also indicate a number of initiatives which are big initiatives on the market there, trying to operate in health with blockchain. We have based our efforts first on some concrete experiences. We ran a project called My Health, My Data, something more than 3 years, from 2016 to 2019, which was based on blockchain and which had an architecture which was characterized by a private permission blockchain recording all transactions related to off-chain data stored by multiple hospitals, repositories, and by individuals. The fact that the data were off-chain is important, and we'll come back to this. There was a metadata catalog allowing to safely inspect what health data were available, the possibility of making use of smart contracts for all the needed consent, and privacy enhancing technologies for assuring GDPR compliance and advanced ways of handling data. And the whole was accompanied by an overall privacy by design and compliance assessment. There is now another project going on called Kraken, which will end in 2022, where we are collaborating with others to construct a marketplace for health data and educational data. And there are a number of complex issues there. We are making this marketplace a way to allow access to data sets and data streams under explicit agreements binding data controllers to specific intended use, access periods, and ability for data subjects to exercise rights. There is a complex, we'll give you some more information about this concerning how to run a blockchain within the data protection regulation. And there is the problem of monetization of data, and particularly of health data, which is still undergoing. And there are discussions on this as clarifying what is the general picture. On the whole, there are a number of regulatory hurdles and constraints which have to be taken into account when dealing with the blockchain. The rights of data minimization to be forgotten, which are apparently at odds with blockchain usability. And that's why these require that personal data should be stored off-chain in order to make them modifiable and deletable. And there is a problem concerning privacy in general, because there is a difficulty in defining anonymous data which do not fall under the General Data Protection Regulation. It is difficult, by the other way, to apply pseudonymous data, which require legal basis, consent, and so on, and they fall under the General Data Protection Regulation. But all these aspects will now be illustrated by my colleague Ludovica Durs, who is speaking about the section 2 of this report. The floor is up to you, Ludovica.
Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, Alex, for following us with the document. So for those who joined this session a bit later, this is the final meeting of the working group on blockchain applications in health, and we are presenting this document, which is the final report of the work and activities performed so far. And I'm going to briefly present this section of the report addressing regulatory and legal aspects related to the use of blockchain and health data, which were discussed in at least a couple of meetings of our working group. And I'm not going to go through deep into this session, but what I wanted to highlight are just a few issues. One is the approach that we have with these topics. So the aim of this review on the legal aspect is to summarize in a simple way some of the basic concepts underlying regulatory and legal issues related to the use of blockchain in healthcare, and with special regard, of course, to the the EU General Data Protection Regulation, which represents, as many of you know, also taking part to other sessions of this RDA. I also followed one yesterday on legal issues and COVID, because the General Data Protection Regulation represents as yet the highest standard for personal data protection worldwide. So this was a very high standard to compare with. This document, of course, is not a legal assessment. We are not going to provide a specific review of the General Data Protection Regulation provisions or of their interpretation, but the aim is to try and highlight the major issues and concerns related to blockchain technology and as far as data protection rules are involved and interlaced in the health domain. So one of the key points to be taken into account is the study conducted by the European Parliament in 2019, which came out after many of our internal meetings on blockchain application in health. And this report is particularly interesting because, of course, it gives also a very thorough description of legal issues and compliance with GDPR. So you can all refer to that if you're interested in in-depth analysis of the provisions and regulation applicable in this field, but also because it highlights most of all that there is a tension between the distributed ledger technologies and the European data protection law. And this is due mainly to two overarching factors. On one side, a kind of different approach, which is based on the GDPR side, on the centralized approach, and turning all around the data controller role, which is the data subjects whom the data subjects can address to enforce their right under the EU data protection law. And data controllers must comply with the GDPR's obligation. On the other side, as we know, blockchain are distributed databases looking for achieving a decentralization. So there is this kind of a tension between a centralized approach and a decentralization purposes. And on the other side, the difficulty is that the GDPR is based on the assumption that data subjects can exercise their rights, modifying or erasing data when necessary to comply with legal requirements, while blockchains is somehow immutable and render the unilateral modification of data purposely onerous. So it is difficult also to reach some basic principles such as data minimization or purpose limitations, which are basis for the GDPR. This report was written mainly with the contribution of a very enlightened lawyer, Michelle Fink, and she proposed mainly two conclusions. One, that the very technical specificities and governance design of blockchain use cases can be hard to reconcile with the GDPR. And so blockchain architects need to be aware of this from the outset and make sure that they design their respective use cases in a manner that allows compliance with European data protection law. And on second hand, that the current lack of legal certainty as to how blockchains can be designed in a compliant way is not just due to the specific features of blockchain technology, but also to the lack of certainty of some basic concepts in the GDPR, as Edwin was also mentioning above, such as in particular anonymization or other concepts. So this lack of legal certainty may make it hard to determine how the regulation should apply not only to blockchain technology, but also to others. Nevertheless, it must be pointed out that blockchain can also be a means to achieve GDPR objectives. We know that they are anyway data governance tools, so the blockchain can also help to enable data sharing without the need for a central trusted intermediary. They can help increasing transparency while using smart contracts and automate the sharing of data. So there are also possibilities to foster this collaboration and compliance. Also, one of the main issues of the GDPR is the control that data subjects can have over the personal data. And this is also something that blockchain technologies can help to implement. And we must not forget that this tension is, of course, data to be taken into account from reality, but it can be addressed and it should be addressed in a case-by-case basis. So in that study, there were some policy options proposed as solution, not the need to review not yet review the General Data Protection Regulation, but to act using other options and tools that we have, such as regulatory guidance, using co-regulatory tools such as codes of conduct and certification mechanism, which are to be implemented also in collaboration with the private sector, and also through research funding to support in the interdisciplinary research, aiming at overcoming technical limitations and to produce technologies which are compliant by design. In fact, the GDPR, as we know, is an expression of principle-based regulation. It is designed to be technologically neutral and to stand the test of time. So that's why it should not be necessary at this moment to review it, but instead to act using the possibilities the GDPR already contains in it. Besides the thorough legal analysis provided in this study commissioned by the European Parliament, this document is instead trying to address and recall the main elements which need to be particularly taken into account on an operational perspective of this working group. And I don't want to go too into depth in the legal framework of the GDPR, but if we just can go through the paragraphs we mention and address in this report. The first part is dedicated to principles and provisions to be taken into account in a general perspective from the EU Data Protection Regulation. So, with reference to the accountability principles, which is to be considered a kind of a golden rule of the GDPR, which means that functions and roles of data controller, data processors, and other subjects involved in the processing of data are related one to another in a security chain, and security management is mainly depending on them. So all minimum measures and appropriate measures are to be implemented on an accountability basis by these subjects. And another thing, apart from the roles and responsibility, which are here specifically addressed on the roles of data controllers and data processors, are the general principles related to health data and scientific research purposes, which are addressed in paragraph 2.4. Because as you know, if we are referring to the health data domain and research purposes, special derogations and provisions are requested by the GDPR. So we know that not only consent is referred to as legal basis for processing, but also that special categories of data which are going under Article 9 of the GDPR, including health data, genetic data, and biometric data, require specific and higher level of attention. On the other side, we know that there is a kind of favor for scientific research in the GDPR, which needs to be counterbalanced with the special levels of attention in processing this sensitive data, so that scientific research can be somehow linked and connected to public interest for processing data. And it may apply for some specific exemptions and conditions in case also of a reuse of data for research purposes, meaning research and consent in a broader way. And of course, data subjects' rights are to be taken into account and implemented in a specific way, but also some specific derogation may apply also in these cases when scientific and medical research is referred to. And one of the other tools that on a practical way we need to take into account, and we specifically refer to it in the paragraph 2.5, is the data protection impact assessment, which means an implementation of the accountability principles on the side of data controllers, and is not meant to be just a bureaucratic tool or a bureaucratic obligation, but really to guarantee as a structural phase of the innovation process, which contributes to the assessment of the innovation's sustainability. And it is required in particular where new technologies are utilized. So this will be the case of blockchain technologies, and especially when data subjects' rights and fundamental rights may be at risk. So this data protection impact assessment must in some cases be carried out, and it is a process to evaluate the operation, the purposes, and the assessment of necessity and proportionality of the operation carried on. And it is based mainly on two principles, the privacy by design and the privacy by the default principles, which were introduced in the General Data Protection Regulation. And people may wonder if DPA is always required for blockchain. As we said, usually things need to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, but up to date, it is presumed that a DPA is necessary for a blockchain system in which the processing of personal data is the very purpose of the system. So trying to address the relation between legal issues and blockchain in health, we know that we have different kind of blockchain, and this maybe will be better addressed by Mirko after my conclusion. And usually, so we have public and permissionless blockchains, we have public and permissioned blockchains, and we have private and permissioned blockchains. The EU Observatory on a European Blockchain Forum recommends that in case personal data are stored on the blockchain, it is necessary to rely on private and permissioned blockchain. When there is no storage, other blockchain structures can be used. But this is a general assessment, and as we said, we need to go on a case-by-case basis. As we said before, different tensions and concerns are related to data subjects' rights in the blockchain environment. This was already stated officially by the French Data Protection Authority in 2018, saying that the exercise of data subjects' rights in the blockchain environment is sometimes very difficult, and so there are several unsolved issues at stake, in particular because of the immutability, as we said before, which may make it hard to implement rights such as the right of erasure, of limitation and rectification. So even if no personal data are registered on the blockchain, actions are to be envisaged in the event of exercise of individual rights to guarantee full accountability. And then, as we were saying before, there is also this problem of fully anonymous data. So even if strong encryption is applied on personal data, it's difficult to have fully anonymous data, so that every time data can still be singled out, they lead to a reversal risk. And this is, of course, to be considered a risk of non-compliance, the linkability of encrypted data to an individual. All such risks can be avoided by preventing the registration of any kind of personal or sensitive data on chain. And this is what, for instance, was applied in one of the projects we cited before, MHMD, My Health, My Data. Well, the encrypted data were stored solely off-chain in a distributed database. Other possible solutions are to be found in practice and are under research development. We talked yesterday in the Health Data Interest Group about making use of synthetic data. This also can be a valuable solution and alternative for GDPR compliance. But in general, as recommended by the EU Observatory report, when looking for GDPR compliance, the following steps shall be considered. One, start with the big picture. So how is the value created for the user, how the data is used, and ask yourself if you really need a blockchain. Two, avoid storing personal data on the blockchain. Make full use of data obfuscation, encryption, and aggregation techniques to anonymize data. Collect personal data off-chain, or if the blockchain cannot be avoided, on private and permission blockchains. And of course, stay up to date and propose innovative solutions, trying to be as transparent as possible towards users. So this is the short review we did about legal issues related to blockchain on an operational perspective, but also other technical and context elements are to be taken into account, and this is the picture my colleague Mirko is going to describe. So, Mirko.
Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to just 1 second. Share my screen. So I see Harris is having trouble, so not sure whether you can see my screen. I see publishing your desktop appears, but
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we see something, but is it the same document we're talking about?
It's an excerpt from the document to facilitate going through it while. Okay. So the blockchain for health data management PowerPoint, because I don't see it, so I just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. Yes, we can see it. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll go through the final part of the report we prepared and sent in today as final outcome of this working group activities. So essentially, what the report addresses is the first of all the need for blockchain, the specific domain of health data, and the framework for or better, the best practices in terms of establishing, creating a blockchain-based solution for health. And at the end, some framework for governance of health data management of health data to blockchain or enabled by blockchain. So I'll go through this presentation quickly, so to leave also space for the debate. But it is important to start from some to recapitulate some key essential elements that make usage of blockchain in healthcare not only an opportunity but also a need that healthcare systems all around the world will need to address sooner or later. The first elements you will find also on the report is the recognition of the fact that medicine is becoming increasingly data-driven science, as you may know, And of course, we have more and more incidents of chronic diseases on healthcare systems. At the same time, we have an of data coming from patients, so patient generated data, which are particularly important for two fundamental things. One is management and self-management of chronic diseases, which of course, and we learned this in the hard way during the COVID-19 crisis, chronic diseases need continuous management and sometimes a direct interaction with the doctor, with the physician, possible. And it happened all around the world in this difficult year that many patients had the difficulty to get some continuity of services when it came to their management of their disease. So we'll need more and more in the future to leverage patient-generated data and environmental data to assess the status of well-being of the patient, assess the progression of a disease, and improve self-management, and in the meanwhile supporting physicians in providing the to patients outside hospitals. And actually, patient-generated data will become the most important source of health data in the next future. This was not the case since just a few years ago, but now we have devices, wearable devices, which will actually the market will increase, will grow in the next few years, and also based system for environmental data analysis. It's important to notice, for example, the European Commission is specifically now asking to research to submit proposal for example, the analysis of indoor air quality and the connection indoor air quality with health. And of course, IoT devices and sensors will play an important role in this area. And most importantly, the idea of using the wisdom of external wisdom of the body, as it's called in a paper that is mentioned in the report from Eric Topol and Kish. It's a fundamental element for improving our way of delivering care, facilitating the well-being of patients and prevention instead of focusing on acute care. In fact, this convergence of technological opportunities and care needs will facilitate or make it necessary to from an hospital-centric model, which is been recently overcame, but from an hospital-centric model, provider-centric model, we really need to go toward a patient-centric model. And going to a patient-centric model means focusing on prevention, focusing on maintaining the well-being of the patient, and to continuous monitoring, risk assessment, stratification of the population in risk categories, and basically allowing the creation of long-term and lifelong interaction. And this sort of interaction will, as a basic infrastructure to happen, will need properly maintained personal data count. And of course, here, if we look at the current situation with data management in healthcare, that patients often are very control their health data. They can't really understand what kind of health data are available for one person. So and they are not really in the position to decide who can access the data for what purpose, or for example using their data for asking to second opinion, or for asking a specialized algorithm to go to the data and spots particularly risky parameters or something like that. So there is an issue of changing the way we manage data, both at the public health level and individual health level. And in this area, we have the possibility through blockchain to at least try and facilitate, enable different sharing. So yes, of course, we are in a data rich but information poor parent, particularly the case for public health systems that are have tons of data coming from different sources, but they can use the data in a systematic and combined way. And at the same time, it's very difficult to mobilize data because there is still a silo logic that is basically inspiring the whole data management process in the healthcare domain, also for regulatory constraints. But as we just saw, we really need to change this current and flawed mechanism of data to really enable a different way of dealing with the provision of healthcare in the next future, in particular considering chronic diseases. But we could also make the point for the management of pandemic like COVID-19, because we had the clear proof that our healthcare systems aren't really able to leverage data available at an environmental level to facilitate the control of a pandemic, and this should not be the case for the next pandemic, if and then it will happen. So in a plan for, let's say, pandemic preparedness, we really need to make sure that this sort of elements will be addressed and available. So blockchain opportunities, say Edwin already said enough, but just for having a specific domain, we have multiple actors, of course, professional, clinician, nurses, patient, payers, researchers that need to access and exchange data in a secure manner, in relevant regulation, ensuring data integrity and provenance, and interacting with external stakeholders without necessarily trust each other. And this is a in the healthcare domain, but we didn't have a proper technical mean to allow this sort of interaction. So blockchain, hopefully we can support this process by addressing the current shortcomings and offering an alternative way to fill in the trust gap between operator, ensuring automating data exchange in a way that both research and care can be improved. So blockchain can facilitate data exchange, rely on peer-to-peer distributed architecture, enable direct access and control of data by patient. This is very important. We will see it, and the report is specifically addressed in the governance part. And it's very difficult, of course, to forge data, so to tamper with the data once are recorded. And we can overcome the current centralized and siloed data storage approach. The last point, I will leave it for now, because we can actually create around patient data, but as we have seen and is reported in this final report, the idea of marketplace is not the only one we can think of when thinking about governance of data and data valorization, but it poses some challenges. But in any case, these are the key elements and opportunities the blockchain can potentially bring about in data management. So I just reported here some very wide scheme of current blockchain domain when it comes to healthcare. So we have use cases from data access and exchange, drugs authenticity, clinical trial, medical IoT. I won't spend time here, just to say that, as you already know, there is a thriving market of blockchain-based solutions, and most interestingly, in the past few months, a number of solutions have been proposed for managing both COVID-19 testing, vaccination certificates, and this is the case, for example, for the European blockchain service infrastructure that a solution for issuing EU valid passport or certificate, or this green for vaccination using blockchain, the blockchain infrastructure built within the European blockchain service infrastructure. So we have really several different kind of use cases, and this is already again some quick recap on the experiences in this area. You will find the same table on the report. Prepared and presented a decision tree for blockchain in a previous session of this. The basic idea is that we recognize it was somehow confusing the way in which blockchain usage was proposed in the healthcare domain, and in a way the market, or better, it seemed like the blockchain was the silver in the healthcare space, which is of course not the case. So we tried to create a framework, first of all, needed to understand whether a blockchain-based solution is actually what was needed for addressing specific issues and in the healthcare domain. And this decision component of it, you will find the report, was thought mainly for people willing to explore blockchain, a blockchain-based solution in specific real-world scenarios. So providing some guidance to understand whether good choice and whether or not we should use a public or a private blockchain architecture. So this is the very first formalization of our decision tree for people willing to explore the usage of blockchain. We then identify top of the initial decision tree some criteria that should be helpful for, again, individuals or organizations interested to design a solution for blockchain-based tools, services, managing the health data. And these are some of these criteria. So, of course, the first one was blockchain innovation in a clear manner and clearly identify the use case. It might sound a bit naive, but actually this was not the case in many different solutions offered or proposed on the market at the time that this initial framework component was developed. So identifying the use case and determining the objectives for the usage of blockchain-based solution, it's actually the first step that undertaken, which we propose into the report. So in particular, showing how the blockchain can help achieving results not achievable through all means. At the same time, of course, some question we formulated some question that needed for understanding the basic architectural requirements for a blockchain-based solution. And so some of these questions are about speed, programmability feature of the system, the number of transactions that will need to be processed by the system according to the expectation of those who want to solution, and how often the transaction needs to be processed, and if there is a need of including specific business logic for automating data sharing process, and what sort of needs we have in terms of specification, rules, and permissions for accessing the data, and what sort of restriction participation we need to consider also for the regulatory elements that Ludovica was presenting just a few minutes ago. At the same time, usability and translation in the operational environment is also an important element to be taken into account. So we included some of these questions in terms of user experience, expectation, workflow, and associated behavior. So what kind of novel workflow needs to be actually designed for allowing the proper usage of a blockchain-based solution for data management, and what are also very important elements, the requirement in terms of with a legacy system, which is often overlooked by commercial solutions proposed on the market. Of course, additional questions made. Just one element here, what I want to say also, the fact that as it was also understood, there was an interesting trend barometer published by HIMSS Europe a couple years ago about the fact that healthcare providers who were the actors in the market providing actual blockchain-based solutions for healthcare, for the healthcare domain, and in fact, we could see kind of a mismatch between the need in the healthcare domain and the proposed solution in the technological, which I think was also something that made it difficult to have proper at scale solution in this domain of blockchain based solution for the healthcare data management. And one issue in particular was step of integration with legacy system, but actually the knowledge about the actual use case was not enough to go much than the basic preliminary or proof of concept of the solution. So this is a very important element. Some additional question is in terms of who will be involved, what will be shared within the network, and what performance and scalability needs are we seeking for, which are also useful to guide in terms of what architectural framework, what technological choices we need to make for making sure the solution will be usable in real-world scenario. And in particular for what will be shared and what data we're going to record on the ledger. Ludovica and Edwin already mentioned, we need to use blockchain as a sort of data index, which basically contains only the metadata and pointers to health data, which will be stored in a variety of data sources, with the sort of ex post interoperability in terms of availability. One single index of different kind of data coming from different sources can be easily, which can be easily mobilized via the authorization of the concerned patient or the patient him or herself. And of we also specified in the report that blockchain should not be considered as a substitute for a database, which is not. Of course, the usage of blockchain as a database would bring a number of issues, not only in terms of regulatory, but also in terms of performance and scalability, because as you know from the theory, in a blockchain system, we have several nodes that duplicate the database thousands of times, and the idea itself of duplicating large kind of data in several thousands of nodes doesn't really make sense. So most of the blockchain-based solutions that are being experimented so far use this approach of having just an index of data with the provenance metadata of specific health data sets stored on chain, with a careful consideration in regard to the sensitive data, which are never stored on the blockchain. In the My Health My Data project mentioned by Edwin, for example, we explored a way in which, in fact, only the data controller, in that case the hospital, can retrieve and understand which data belongs to which patient only locally, while nobody accessing the data only available on actually retrieve this information. And this was a kind of a technical challenge which we try and sort out in My Health My Data, specific approach there with a locally running sort of database that made matching between blockchain index and local database. Of course, might be different other kind of solutions but this is actually a clear challenge from the technical perspective. Sorry, oh, sorry. I'm not sure what I'm. Okay, that's a good one. No, sorry. To just move around. Yeah, maybe that.
There's left for the finish of the session. It's 11.
It's 11. Yeah, no, I'm complete here. Final things on performance and scalability. As Ludovica mentioned, of course, there is a preference to use permission blockchain also beside the regulatory constraints, also in terms for offering performance usage of a blockchain-based solution. And both performance and scalability hints toward the usage of permission blockchain. And of course, allows to vet, to perform a vetting process for the participant in beforehand. And this is also needed for being in compliance with regulation. In the report at the end, you will find this general architecture is very brief way of summarizing some of the needs. And we have data sources, a data mapping and a harmonization and normalization process. And then on chain, we will have just the register for data item, the provenance and associated with the data, the metadata, which describe the data itself. And then we have the blockchain health information exchange system that also manages consent and permission management, data provenance and integrity, and the like, so that we can have a proper distribution processes between the blockchain and what happens off chain. We just on the alternative models, you will find discussed in the report of data governance powered by the blockchain, because of course there is not only the technical issue we need to understand, but it's also the governance, the management issue of the data. So we explored mainly marketplaces, open distributed data platform. So we have data marketplace, which focus on direct exchange of data against economic value. Technical and business features are needed to enable smooth data interaction, but in particular to enforce data ownership, facilitate data aggregation and packaging, so that the offer of data to data user is actually it's provided. And in particular, in this area, the some important elements of data service agreement models, automated contract negotiation, system for matching demand and offer, and a data pricing model, which is very, very complicated to achieve. You will find some basic information on the report itself. Besides, of course, when it comes to selling health data, there is a whole bunch of ethical and legal issues that needs to be considered, and sometimes it's not even possible to do. Then we focus on publicly maintained open distributed data platform, which focus on maximizing the usage of data for pursuing public goods. I will not go through the, as you can see, these tools can be managed by public institutions, create negotiation power for data owners toward data users, and public health effort. And you can think about COVID-19 management with the availability of such an open distributed data platform available, which includes, of course, patients generated data from mobile and wearable devices. And the last point is very important: the opportunity for public health institutions to establish a new therapeutic and citizens, which is very important in a context of renewed health consumerism in this area. Last but not least, data cooperatives. I will stop here. You will find the final one is about the emergence of this phenomenon of data cooperatives, which are organizations individual members have complete ownership and control over their own data and govern and are also responsible for governing the organization itself, and the directly benefiting the members of the data cooperative when sharing the data with external stakeholders. So the first and foremost, maybe right for members to gain additional insight over the collective pool of data to improve general well-being, and of course, this is very important to think about rare diseases or the focus on specific improvement of treatment and care or research in particular disease. This might be a very interesting model to explore in the next future, which blockchain can actually enable. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mirko. So there is still some time for discussing. This report will be for now fine-tuned and published online so that people can read it and come back with comments and edits, and then there will be the final version. So are there questions? Are there remarks?
Yes, there were a couple of questions. One in question and answer. Could differential privacy possibly help with a single out problem? Would that be applicable in the blockchain environment?
Yes, this is an interesting, which in part we've been discussing also yesterday in the health data interest group. Differential privacy is extremely interesting as a way of quantifying and giving a mathematical basis to privacy. In fact, it's the stronger method which has come up until now, and there is an interesting possibility of using differential privacy in connection with synthetic data, which were mentioned earlier by Ludovica. So the possibility of having an exchange of data based on compliance with the GDPR, which is based on the fact that the data which are exchanged are non-personal. They are artificial data. They are anonymized, and this non-re-identification of the data is guaranteed by a mechanism as the differential privacy system approach. This is extremely interesting, and is what can be done. There is an interesting element of discussing this more in depth, combining it also with of secure computation, having secure computation combined with such systems. This is one of the forthcoming calls by the European Commission to announce for the year 2022. So these are really elements which can be interesting and can facilitate what happens on this basis. The direct link with blockchain is not a direct link, there is an indirect link. So these are tools which can be used as privacy-enhancing technologies, and which can be facilitated by the fact that with the blockchain, you can have a system by which all data gets into movement, are mobilized, though remaining in the separated repositories, but there is a which you can checking what the data are, having an analysis of the metadata, and then what are the elements of facilitation, where it is on a basis of legal framework, consent basis under the GDPR, or can operate outside of it with data which are considered anonymous. Are there other questions?
Yes, there are. Mirko, maybe you can read one on the chat about NFTs for healthcare.
Yeah. NFT, of course, it's an interesting technology to think about, and the thing that comes to mind is possibly the usage for proving provenance, authenticity of specific in a way that pharmaceutical products, I'm thinking, in a way that the final user can be doubly assured of the fact that the product is authentic. There are some ideas of making of the whole, for example, it might be interesting, not entirely sure of the practical consequence of this, making of our, say, digital as a personal, a sort of digital representation of our body, as an extension of a personal data account, as an NFT, just to ensure or facilitate governance by individual users and improve control over the underlying digital assets. But I'm not entirely sure this is technically viable. But it might be fascinating to explore this usage in this sense, and this might also have some consequence for the usage of data or for specific kind of diseases or for rare diseases. So we have non-fungible token representing data coming from specific kind of patients that can be used as unique data sources via blockchain and cryptographic mechanism. But I'm just thinking out loud because, to be honest, beside the usage or possibly further authentication of medicinal products or maybe devices, in terms of issuing both the and the device or the product together, and so you have some sort of additional insurance of the authenticity or provenance of that device. The second thing comes to mind is this idea of digitizing and making of our digital avatar an NFT, but this makes sense. So this is the honest answer, Keith. I don't know whether this it's somehow interesting from your perspective. I've had other thoughts on this topic.
There was also another question, if there is no reaction on that. So
well, unless the presenter of the first, the question which Mirko answered wants to expand on it.
I can't get my audio on, but I agree. Thanks, Mirko.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
So there's also
the
another question. Yes. Technically speaking, there is a need for ontology to present all the GDPR rules, the blockchain, and maybe some homomorphic encryption. Do you think that with today's advances, this can be implemented on edge parts on the patient side? And second, is it possible to use that for drug traceability?
Yes, well, there are experiences going on for drug traceability. As I mentioned, I think something from the FDA, which is exactly doing this. So this experimented at sea and even publicly supported. The problem of having everything on, well, there is a problem of general. This is a more general thing concerning the fact that we need to have a common definition of all medical language in all aspects, so that this can be compared and referred to in a unified way. And this is something which differs in the medical mechanism. I think that this is being addressed now. There are specific calls data on making this possible, having of all the elements. So this is a general debate which is going on, and which is certainly going to be facilitated by the fact that the blockchain operates with automated systems with smart contracts implying specific consequences of what is defined and so on. So this is a process which and is not an issue then underlies what can be done in the specific sector of distributed ledger technologies, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to add some possibility of also leveraging IoT, medical IoT, and edge computing for providing some kind of to patients, and using the blockchain for managing both data and resources for doing this. And there are a number of research in the area, and to facilitate the data analytics without requiring a direct cloud connection with central server, in particular for the usage of, for example, related algorithms in emergency settings. But to best of my knowledge, I haven't seen nothing at scale. But I firmly believe that blockchain, edge computing, IoT, and AI will converge to provide novel tools to citizens before they become patients and then to patients.
Okay, so there was also another reaction from Keys. Maybe you can just read it, but NFTs could also serve as proof of, for example, arm assignment in clinical trials, where you fix it at time of mounting broadcasting, but only reveal the content later. And then there were two other questions. So one is, could you give a pointer to the RD blockchain application in healthcare guidelines document? Of course, we will conclude on that. And maybe there was just a last question. Is OpenEHR relevant as health data interchange standard? From Jan.
I couldn't see that. What
is in Q&A, the European Health Research.
I can't see it. Where is it?
Yeah, no, I found it. Yeah. So, well, electronic health records and, of course, open EHR is relevant. Now, the point is, how can you make this open? And this goes back to the questions which were raised by Ludovica in the part of the report she illustrated, because there are the elements of privacy which have to be guaranteed, the rights of the data subjects. So all this goes back to how you can find, and that's why, in fact, there are a number of analyses going on seeing whether we can either state some form of concrete anonymity. And that's the effort discussed yesterday on synthetic data in combination with differential privacy, and maybe even going further with other ways of privacy-enhancing technology which can be combined with this. Or otherwise, you can operate with the existing data, and this must be on the basis of what is the legal authorization you have for doing this as a clinical institution, or as or guarantee your consent as an individual, a data subject. And so this is something which is anyway dependent on this. So how to realize open data in this area is still a matter of to be clearly defined, as far as I've understood. There is another question.
I think we
just
I just wanted to comment on the last comment of Keys on NFT for understanding clinical trials. Another possible which actually it's an existing trend of non-cash assets asset tokenization, including our, which could become NFT in the way that instead of funding activities before they are actually completed, then you can basically create an NFT that defines the outcome for a specific campaign, for example, vaccination in a specific area, and with specific medicines and so on and so forth, with specific characteristics, if you will, and making of it something that can that the payer of this service is actually paying something that's been incrementally defined and then certified and then became an NFT. And this also for auditing of activities in this area could be interesting to explore. But again, thinking out loud.
So as far as the document is concerned, we will make it available after just a short review of the document on both the Health Data Interest Group website and on the Blockchain Application in Health Working Group website. So it will be made available. And I don't know if Isabel per se is here, and if she maybe can give us also other direction on how the results of a working group may be shared within the RDA community, or if she has other comments as we are concluding the working group activities today. I don't know if she's still here or she can hear us.
She was attending at the moment. I saw her, but maybe she's no more. She's no longer there.
Okay, so we will
anyway,
keep in touch anyway.
If there are further suggestions.
Yeah. So we will let you know through if you are signed in the groups or in the Health Data Interest Group or in this working group. We will send you also an email with all the information about the sharing of the document and other progress activities, if you want to be updated on these topics and issues. Yeah, I don't think she's here.
Other questions from other partners?
Yeah, so we have 7 minutes left, or...
Apparently not. So, well, we can then perhaps just conclude a few minutes earlier. Yes. If there are no further issues, and we will be ready to see your comments on the report. It is put online, and please just do write if you have elements of to suggest integrations of anything which can be still improved. Any comments by you, Mirko or Ludovica before we close the session?
Oh, it will be interesting to see on the document, and although the working group completed its activities, I still like to think of the document as a living document. So I don't think possible to continue discussing it or gathering feedback and improving the document itself, even after the formal publication. I mean, it would be interesting for the purpose of the document itself, even after the completion of the working group activity.
I don't know if within the RDA, usually there's this aim of having a more concentrated bunch of recommendations, which maybe we can take out from the document. So after discussing and implementing it also with comments from other RDA members, maybe we can try to have a very short recommendation documents on that.
Yeah, this is a good advice. And I think, yes, because it is a bulky document of around 50 pages. So in order to make it easily transformed into takeaways, something like this should be organized. Yes, I think we should do some work on this, but it will be also useful to get some feedback from the members of this group who have been attending and who are willing to read the document.
Yes, so we have many people thanking and waiting for the report to be available and to read it. So we will do it quite in a short time, and maybe in the next RDA there will be also a chance to have another discussion on that if we need it. So
well, we may anyway reconvene in the interest group on health
yes,
data.
Of course, there's space in there.
Okay, so thanks to all those who have been attending and to those who have raised questions. And that's it. You will soon read the full report. Thank you so much.